The morning rush at Riverside Cafe was in full swing when Abby Martinez noticed him. The man in the crisp navy suit sitting alone by the window. Something about his profile caught her attention, a fleeting sense of familiarity that she couldn't quite place. Perhaps it was the way he absently ran his fingers through his dark hair, or how he gazed out at the Hudson River with a contemplative expression. Abby shook her head, dismissing the thought. After 6 years of serving coffee in downtown Manhattan, faces had begun to blur together. "Table 12 needs a refill," called Donna, the cafe manager, snapping Abby back to reality. "And don't forget the corporate order for the Patterson building." Balancing the coffee pot in one hand and tucking a stray strand of chestnut hair behind her ear with the other, Abby navigated through the maze of tables. At 28, she had mastered the art of efficiency, moving with a grace that belied her exhaustion. The apron tied around her waist carried a notepad, 3 pens, and tips that would hopefully cover this month's electric bill. "More coffee?" she asked, approaching the mysterious man's table. He looked up, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. His eyes were a striking shade of blue, the kind that reminded her of summer skies in Millfield, the small Pennsylvania town where she'd grown up. There was something achingly familiar about them, but the recognition slipped away like water through her fingers. "Please," he said, his voice deep and measured. His gaze lingered on her name tag. "Thank you, Abby." The way he said her name sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Enjoy your coffee," she replied with a practiced smile, already turning toward her next table. Behind her, the man watched her retreat, a mixture of emotions playing across his features before he carefully composed himself and returned to the financial report on his tablet. Abby finished her morning shift with aching feet and a decent collection of tips. The mysterious man had left a $20 bill for a $5 coffee, not unusual for Wall Street types who barely noticed such amounts. What was unusual was the business card tucked beneath it, with only a name and number: Jackson Reed, Monarch Ventures. No request for her to call, no scribbled note, just his information, left like a breadcrumb. The card remained in her apron pocket as she caught the subway to her tiny Bronx apartment. The building was run down but affordable, a far cry from the life she'd once imagined for herself. College dreams had evaporated when her father's medical bills mounted, forcing her to drop out and work full-time. Now, at 28, she juggled waitressing with night classes in business administration, clinging to the hope that someday she might finish her degree. That evening, as rain pattered against her window, Abby pulled out the business card again. Monarch Ventures. She'd heard the name before. It was one of those massive investment firms that transformed city skylines and made headlines. Why would an executive from such a company leave his card for a waitress? Curiosity got the better of her, and she typed the name Jackson Reed into her laptop's search bar. The results made her jaw drop. Jackson Reed wasn't just an executive, he was the founder and CEO of Monarch Ventures, with an estimated net worth of several $billion. His face appeared in numerous photos, at charity galas, breaking ground on development projects, speaking at economic forums. Abby stared at the images, that sense of familiarity returning stronger than before. There was something about his eyes, the slight crook in his smile, but surely she would remember meeting someone like him. As lightning flashed outside her window, illuminating the small apartment, a childhood memory surfaced of summer days by Millfield Creek, skipping stones with a blue-eyed boy named Jack. Jack Reed, her neighbor and best friend until age 12, when his family suddenly moved away after his father lost his job at the steel mill. "It can't be," she whispered, comparing the images on her screen to the memory of that lanky, mischievous boy with scraped knees and wild dreams. The next morning, Abby arrived at work earlier than usual, her mind racing with questions. Had Jackson recognized her? Was it truly the same Jack from her childhood? And if so, why hadn't he said anything? Her answers came sooner than expected. When she emerged from the back room, he was there again, sitting at the same window table. This time, when their eyes met, his expression changed, a flicker of uncertainty, as if he too was navigating uncharted waters. Abby approached his table with a racing heart. "Good morning. Coffee again today?" "Yes, thank you." He hesitated, then added, "I was hoping I might see you again." "You left your card yesterday," she said, pouring his coffee with a steady hand that belied her inner turmoil. "I did." His fingers drummed lightly against the table. I wasn't sure if you remembered me. The confirmation sent her heart into her throat. Jack? From Millfield? The coffee pot trembled slightly in her grip. His smile transformed his face, erasing the polished veneer of success to reveal glimpses of the boy she'd once known. It's been a long time, Abby. 16 years of separation hung between them, filled with divergent paths and unanswered questions. Before she could respond, the cafe door burst open as a morning tour group arrived, demanding her attention. I get off at 3, she said quickly, already backing away to handle the new customers. I'll be here, he promised, his eyes never leaving hers. The hours crawled by as Abby served customers on autopilot, her mind whirling with memories. She remembered Jack's treehouse where they'd shared secrets, the creek where they'd caught frogs, the day he'd defended her against bullies despite being outnumbered. Most of all, she remembered the hollow feeling when he'd disappeared from her life without a goodbye. What she couldn't reconcile was how that same boy had transformed into a billionaire businessman whose name appeared on buildings. Their worlds couldn't be more different now, she struggling to make rent, and he featured in Forbes magazine. At precisely 3 o'clock, Abby untied her apron and clocked out, her heart pounding. Would he still be there? What would she say to the boy who had once been her world, now a stranger after 16 years? As she pushed through the staff door, she saw him waiting, standing now, his tall frame silhouetted against the afternoon light. For a suspended moment, past and present collided, the boy with the crooked smile and the man with the power to shape skylines. Neither of them could have predicted how this unexpected reunion would upend their carefully constructed lives, or the secrets and revelations that lay waiting to be uncovered. The simple act of serving coffee to a stranger had set in motion events that would challenge everything Abby thought she knew about her past, her present, and the future she'd resigned herself to accepting. They chose to walk along the riverside path, away from the bustle of the city streets. Jackson had removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, looking slightly less intimidating, but no less out of place beside Abby in her waitress uniform. 16 years, Abby said, breaking the awkward silence between them. That's a long time to disappear, Jack. He winced at the edge in her voice. I know. We left so suddenly. My father's pride was shattered when the mill closed. He couldn't face staying in Millfield after losing everything. You could have written, she said, the words carrying the weight of a 12-year-old girl's broken heart. I waited for weeks, checking the mailbox every day. Jackson stopped walking, turning to face her fully. I did write, Abby. I wrote 7 letters that first year. When you never replied, I figured you'd moved on. Confusion crossed her features. I never received any letters. I sent them to your grandmother's address, the only one I had after we moved to Pittsburgh. Understanding dawned on Abby's face. Grandma Ellie never gave them to me. She probably thought she was protecting me. After you left, I was... She hesitated, devastated. She must have thought a clean break would be easier. They resumed walking, the revelation settling between them. Abby glanced at Jackson's profile, still trying to reconcile the boy she knew with the man beside her. So how does Jack from the Creek become Jackson Reed, billionaire extraordinaire? She asked, gesturing toward the skyline where several buildings bore his company's name. A rueful smile crossed his face. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. After Pittsburgh, we moved to Chicago, where my father found work as a night janitor in a high-rise office building. I'd help him sometimes, and I became fascinated by the stock market reports left open on executives' computers. You were always good with numbers, Abby remembered. You used to calculate baseball statistics in your head. That skill came in handy, he acknowledged. I got a scholarship to Northwestern, worked 3 jobs to cover expenses, and interned at a trading firm. Made my first million at 24 with a tech investment that everyone else overlooked. He spoke matter-of-factly, without boasting, as if describing someone else's life. But success came at a cost. My father never recovered from our Millfield downfall, died of a heart attack my sophomore year of college. My mother followed 3 years later. I'm so sorry, Jack. Abby reached out impulsively, touching his arm. I didn't know. How could you? His voice softened. What about you, Abby? I always imagined you'd become a marine biologist. You were obsessed with Jacques Cousteau documentaries. She laughed, the sound tinged with wistfulness. Life had other plans. Dad got sick my freshman year of college. Cancer. The medical bills bankrupted us. I dropped out to care for him and never went back. Is he? He passed away 4 years ago, she said quietly. Mom moved to Florida to live with my aunt afterward. I stayed in New York. I'm taking night classes in business administration, but at this rate I'll get my degree when I'm 50. They reached a small park overlooking the river and sat on a bench. The contrast between them couldn't be more stark. Jackson in his tailored clothes, Abby in her coffee-stained uniform, yet the ease of their conversation belied the years and circumstances that separated them. "Why didn't you say anything yesterday?" she asked. "When I served your coffee, did you recognize me right away?" Jackson leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I wasn't completely sure at first, but when I saw your name tag, Abby, and noticed the birthmark near your wrist..." He gestured to the small crescent-shaped mark she'd had since birth. Something clicked. "I spent all night looking through old photographs, confirming my suspicions." "But why come back today? Surely Jackson Reed has more important things to do than revisit childhood connections." His expression turned serious. "That's just it, Abby. I have every material thing a person could want, but lately I've been questioning what it's all for. I came to the cafe yesterday to clear my head before a major acquisition meeting. I'm considering buying the Henderson Media Group." Abby's eyes widened. Henderson Media was a telecommunications empire worth billions. "The board is pushing for it," he continued, "but something doesn't feel right. When I saw you yesterday, it was like a sign, a reminder of a time when decisions were simpler, and I knew exactly who I was." A cynical part of Abby wanted to dismiss his words as the philosophical musings of someone who had never known real struggle, but the earnestness in his eyes reminded her of the boy who had once shared his deepest fears with her in a treehouse. "You said your father passed 4 years ago," Jackson said, changing the subject. "I'm truly sorry, Abby. He was a good man, always let us fish on his property, even when other landowners posted no trespassing signs." "He never changed," she smiled sadly. "Generous to a fault. The hospital bills were enormous, but he refused to sell the family land until the very end." Jackson looked at her sharply. "The property on Millfield Creek, with the old stone farmhouse?" "Yes. We finally had to sell it to cover the last of his medical expenses." Something flashed across Jackson's features, recognition, then calculation. "Do you know who bought it?" "Some development company, I think. River Valley Enterprises. They said they were planning a nature retreat or something." She shrugged. "I never followed up. It was too painful to think about strangers living there." Jackson fell silent, a muscle working in his jaw. After a moment, he spoke carefully. "River Valley is a Monarch Ventures subsidiary. I didn't make the connection when we acquired it. The name Martinez is common, and I never saw the previous owner details." Abby stared at him, processing the implication. "Are you saying you own my family's property?" "Technically, yes. We purchased several parcels in that area for a planned eco-resort." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar from their childhood that it made her heart ache despite her growing unease. "What a coincidence," she said, her voice cooler than before. "Abby, I swear I didn't know. The property acquisitions are handled by our development team. I only approve the final projects." He reached for her hand, which she reluctantly allowed. "This changes things. If that land has sentimental value to you—" "Don't," she interrupted, withdrawing her hand. "I don't want your charity, Jack. That's not why I told you about my father." His phone buzzed insistently. With an apologetic glance, he checked the screen and grimaced. "I'm sorry, I have to take this. The Henderson deal—" Abby nodded stiffly, standing up. "You should go. Your billion-dollar empire awaits." "Abby, please." Jackson stood as well, towering over her. "Have dinner with me tonight. There's so much more to talk about." She hesitated, torn between walking away from the painful reminder of all she had lost and the undeniable pull she still felt toward him. "I have class tonight," she said finally. "Tomorrow then, please." The polished businessman was gone, replaced by the earnest boy she once knew. Against her better judgment, she nodded. "Fine. Tomorrow." As they parted ways, Jackson heading toward a sleek black car that had appeared at the curb, Abby toward the subway station, neither could have predicted the revelations that awaited them, or how their reconnection would uncover secrets buried beneath 16 years of silence. Jackson watched her disappear into the crowd, his phone still buzzing in his hand. A notification appeared on the screen, an email from his chief of staff with the subject line, "Urgent Millfield Properties Investigation Results." His stomach tightened as he opened it, scanning the contents with growing concern. The coincidence of reconnecting with Abby and the report's findings seemed too significant to ignore. Meanwhile, Abby descended into the subway station, her mind reeling. Meeting Jack again, now Jackson Reed, had reopened old wounds, but also awakened possibilities she had long since abandoned. However, the revelation about her family's land left her unsettled. Was their reunion truly chance, or was there something more calculated at play? As the train arrived, screeching to a halt before her, Abby made a decision. Before seeing Jackson again, she needed to learn more about Monarch Ventures and their plans for her family's legacy. What she would discover would shake the foundations of everything she believed about the past 16 years, and about the boy who had once been her whole world. The Henderson Media headquarters occupied the 35th floor of a gleaming skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. Jackson stood at the window of the conference room, staring at the city sprawled beneath him while 12 board members waited for his decision. The acquisition documents lay unsigned on the table. "Mr. Reed?" prompted Victor Harlow, his CFO. "The Henderson representatives are expecting an answer today." Jackson turned, his expression unreadable. "I need another 24 hours. Murmurs of dissatisfaction rippled through the room. They had been working on this deal for months, and the board was eager to announce the acquisition before the quarterly earnings report. "Is there a problem we should be aware of?" asked Diana Mitchell, the sharp-tongued head of legal affairs. Jackson's mind flashed to the email he had received yesterday about the Millfield properties. "I'm not convinced this acquisition aligns with our long-term vision," he said carefully. "There are some concerning patterns in Henderson's regional development strategies." It was a half-truth. While Henderson's business practices did concern him, it was the revelation about how Monarch had acquired the Martinez property and several others in Millfield that troubled him more. According to the internal investigation he had ordered last night, River Valley Enterprises had employed questionable tactics to pressure financially vulnerable landowners to sell below market value. The report specifically noted that George Martinez, Abby's father, had been approached multiple times during his illness, each offer lower than the last as his medical bills mounted. The knowledge made Jackson physically ill. While he hadn't been personally involved, it had happened under his company's umbrella. Worse still, the investigation revealed that River Valley's representative, Kyle Winters, had intentionally obscured the property's potential mineral value from the sellers. 24 hours, Jackson repeated firmly. "That's all I need." After dismissing the meeting, he called his most trusted associate. "Michael, I need everything we have on Kyle Winters and the Millfield acquisitions. And book me on the first flight to Pittsburgh tomorrow." The restaurant Jackson had chosen for dinner with Abby was understated yet exclusive, a small farm-to-table establishment tucked away on a tree-lined street in the West Village. He had arrived early, requesting a private table in the back garden. When Abby entered, he almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the waitress uniform, replaced by a simple green dress that brought out the amber flecks in her eyes. Her hair, freed from its practical ponytail, fell in soft waves around her shoulders. "You look beautiful," he said, rising to greet her. "This old thing," she replied with a small smile. "Just something I had in the back of my closet." The slight tremor in her voice betrayed her nervousness, and Jackson was struck by how vulnerable she appeared. This woman who had endured so much hardship, yet carried herself with quiet dignity. "I hope you don't mind," he said as they settled in, "but I took the liberty of asking the chef to prepare something special. He's recreating a dish from a restaurant in Millfield, Mason's Grill. Do you remember it?" Abby's expression softened. "The blackberry cobbler. We used to save our allowance for weeks to split one." "Exactly, though I suspect this version might be slightly more sophisticated." As they dined, the years between them seemed to melt away. They reminisced about childhood adventures, the time they built a raft that promptly sank in the creek, the summer they tried to catch fireflies in jars to make lanterns, the secret language they had invented to pass notes in class. "Do you remember Mrs. Holloway?" Abby laughed. "She was convinced our code was inappropriate messages and made us write it out in English, only to discover we were planning a surprise party for the school janitor," Jackson grinned. Her face when she realized her mistake was priceless. Abby's smile faded slightly. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about my family's property. I did some research on Monarch Ventures last night. Jackson set down his fork, his expression turning serious. I've been doing some investigating of my own. That's actually something I wanted to discuss with you tonight. What did you find out? She asked, tension evident in her voice. The acquisition of your father's property, and others in Millfield, wasn't handled ethically. His jaw tightened. A subsidiary company executive named Kyle Winters used pressure tactics to acquire land at below-market rates, specifically targeting families in financial distress. Abby's face paled, like my father during his cancer treatments. Yes, Jackson confirmed grimly. But there's more. The land in Millfield, including your family's property, sits on what appears to be significant natural gas deposits, information that was deliberately withheld from sellers. So not only did they take advantage of my dying father, they cheated him out of the true value of our land? Abby's voice had gone dangerously quiet. I didn't know, Abby. These acquisitions happen at levels far removed from my direct oversight. But that's no excuse. It happened under my company's name. He reached across the table for her hand. I'm flying to Pittsburgh tomorrow to meet with our regional development team, then driving to Millfield to see the properties myself. She withdrew her hand. And you're telling me this now because I want you to come with me. Her eyebrows shot up. To Millfield? Why would you want me there? Because I need to make this right, and I can't do that without understanding what the land truly meant to your family. He leaned forward. Also selfishly, because returning to where we began feels significant somehow. Abby studied him, conflicting emotions playing across her features. How do I know this isn't some elaborate gesture to assuage your guilt? Or worse, a PR move to protect your company's reputation if this unethical behavior becomes public? The accusation stung, but Jackson recognized the walls she had built to protect herself. You don't know, he admitted. You'll have to trust me, or at least give me the chance to earn your trust again. Before she could respond, his phone vibrated. Glancing at it, Jackson's expression darkened. It's Michael. Apparently Kyle Winters got wind of our investigation. He's trying to push through the Henderson deal without my approval, using some technical loophole in our corporate structure. And just like that, real life interrupts, Abby said with a resigned smile. I need to handle this. I'm sorry. He signaled for the check. The flight leaves at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I'll have a car pick you up at 8 if you decide to come. He scribbled his private number on a napkin and slid it across to her. Whatever you decide, I want you to have this. After paying the bill, Jackson walked Abby to a waiting car he had arranged to take her home. Standing on the sidewalk, he searched for the right words to convince her, but nothing seemed adequate. Good night, Jack, she said simply, climbing into the car. He watched the vehicle disappear into the night, wondering if he had already lost his second chance with Abby before it truly began. The next morning, Jackson's private jet waited on the tarmac at Teterboro Airport. He checked his watch. 8:45 a.m. The car he had sent for Abby would have arrived at her apartment 45 minutes ago. The fact that she wasn't here suggested she had made her decision. We're cleared for takeoff in 15 minutes, Mr. Reed, the pilot informed him. Jackson nodded, trying to mask his disappointment. Thank you, Captain. We'll depart as scheduled. He had just settled into his seat when his phone rang. An unknown number. Jackson Reed speaking. Your driver is the most persistent man I've ever met. Abby's voice came through the line. He refused to leave until I at least called you. Relief flooded through him. Does that mean you're considering coming after all? It means I have questions that need answers, she replied. But I can't just drop everything and fly to Pennsylvania. I have work, classes. I've already spoken to Donna at the cafe. She's giving you paid leave for 3 days as a consulting opportunity for Monarch Ventures, and one missed class won't derail your education. You arranged all that without knowing if I'd agree. There was a hint of amusement in her voice now. I'm an optimist, he replied, and I'm running out of time to convince you. The line went silent for so long that Jackson thought she might have hung up. Finally, she spoke. The driver says we can be there in 20 minutes. Does that work with your schedule, Mr. Billionaire? Jackson couldn't suppress his smile. I think we can delay takeoff for Abigail Martinez. When her car pulled up alongside the plane, Jackson was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Abby emerged, looking both determined and slightly overwhelmed by the private jet. Last chance to back out, he offered as she approached. She squared her shoulders. I'm not doing this for you, Jack. I'm doing it for my father and for the truth about what happened to our land. He nodded solemnly. That's all I can ask for. As they ascended the stairs together, neither could have anticipated the startling truths awaiting them in Millfield, revelations that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the past and force them to confront the question of whether some broken things could truly be mended. What began as a simple cup of coffee served to a stranger had evolved into a journey neither had expected, back to their beginnings, back to unresolved hurts, and perhaps, if they were brave enough, toward a future neither had dared to imagine. Millfield had changed in 16 years, yet remained hauntingly familiar. As their rental car crested the hill overlooking the town, Abby felt a physical ache in her chest. The steel mill that had once been the community's lifeblood stood abandoned at the edge of town, its skeletal frame a monument to broken promises and economic devastation. "It's smaller than I remembered," Jackson murmured beside her. "Or maybe we've just gotten bigger," Abby replied. They drove down Main Street past storefronts that had once housed thriving businesses, now either boarded up or replaced by dollar stores and pawn shops. The diner where they used to share milkshakes had become a vape shop. The movie theater where they'd watched their first film together was now a storage facility. "Turn here," Abby directed as they approached a familiar intersection. "Let's see the creek first," Jackson obliged, navigating down the winding road that led to Millfield Creek. The area that had once been their childhood playground was now cordoned off with no trespassing signs bearing the River Valley Enterprises logo. "Development hasn't started yet," Jackson noted, parking the car on the shoulder. Ignoring the signs, Abby climbed out and made her way toward the creek bank. Jackson followed silently. The water still flowed clear and swift over smooth stones, the surrounding trees now 16 years taller but otherwise unchanged. "We were happy here," she said quietly, "before everything fell apart." Jackson stood beside her, close but not touching. "Your father's land begins about half a mile upstream, right?" She nodded. "Let's go there now. I need to see it." The Martinez property looked abandoned, the old stone farmhouse standing empty with curtainless windows. Tall grass had overtaken the once-tended gardens. A property of River Valley Enterprises sign was the only indication of its current ownership. Using keys he had obtained before leaving New York, Jackson unlocked the front door. Abby hesitated on the threshold, overwhelmed by memories. Her father sitting in his favorite armchair by the fireplace, her mother baking in the kitchen, family dinners around the oak table that was now conspicuously absent. "They took all our furniture," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "The sale included only the property, not the contents," Jackson replied, frowning. "Your family should have been able to keep everything or sell it separately." Abby wandered through the empty rooms, trailing her fingers along walls that held the ghosts of picture frames. Most of it was sold to cover medical bills, but there were family heirlooms, Mum's china cabinet, Dad's grandfather clock, that we specifically excluded from any sale. Jackson's expression darkened. "That's not right. I need to make a call." While he stepped outside, Abby climbed the stairs to what had once been her bedroom. The faded outline of posters still marked the walls, marine life charts and astronomy maps that had fueled her childhood dreams. The window overlooked the creek, and she could just make out the remains of the tree house where she and Jack had spent countless summer afternoons. Jackson appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "I just spoke with Michael. He's been digging deeper into Kyle Winter's activities. It appears he didn't just pressure your father into selling. He misrepresented the contract terms. The original agreement specified that personal property would be excluded and that your family would retain partial mineral rights." "But that's not what happened," Abby stated flatly. "No. Winters substituted different documents at signing, something easily done when dealing with someone weakened by illness and financial stress." Abby's hands clenched into fists. "That's fraud." "Yes, it is. And based on Michael's investigation, your family wasn't the only victim. At least 7 other Millfield properties were acquired using similar tactics." "What happens now?" she asked. "Legally, Winters will face charges. The properties can be returned or renegotiated at fair value with proper terms." He paused. "But first, there's something else we need to see. Something Michael discovered that might explain Winter's particular interest in your family's land." They drove further into the property, following an overgrown access road that wound behind the farmhouse and into the woods. After about a mile, they reached a clearing where construction equipment sat idle. "Test drilling," Jackson explained. "Standard procedure before development begins." "For what? Natural gas?" "That's what I thought initially," he said. leading her toward a temporary office trailer. But Michael found something odd in the geological surveys. Inside the trailer, Jackson powered up a computer and pulled up a series of technical reports. These are the official surveys filed with the county and shown to our board, indicating moderate natural gas deposits consistent with the region. He clicked to another file. And these are the actual survey results that Winters kept hidden. Abby leaned closer, trying to make sense of the technical data. What am I looking at? Rare earth elements, specifically neodymium and dysprosium. They're essential for manufacturing everything from smartphones to electric vehicles and wind turbines. Increasingly valuable and strategic resources. And they're here, under my family's property, under the entire eastern portion of your land, extending into the neighboring parcels. Based on these readings, it could be one of the most significant deposits in North America. He turned to face her. Winters wasn't just securing land for an eco-resort. He was orchestrating a mineral rights grab, planning to extract these elements without sharing the profits with the original owners. Abby sank into a chair, processing the magnitude of the deception. So, my father died thinking he'd failed to preserve his family legacy, when in fact he was sitting on a fortune that could have saved him. I'm so sorry, Abby. Jackson knelt beside her chair. I can't change what happened, but I can make it right now. She met his gaze, searching for the boy she once trusted implicitly in the face of the powerful man before her. How? First, by stopping this development immediately. Second, by restructuring the agreements with all affected families, returning property ownership where desired, and establishing fair compensation for mineral rights. He took her hand. And third, by creating a foundation in your father's name to ensure Millfield benefits from any resource development, job training, infrastructure, environmental protections. His sincerity was unmistakable, but Abby had learned the hard way that good intentions weren't always enough. And what does Jackson Reed get out of this arrangement? Monarchs aren't known for their philanthropy. A shadow crossed his face. I deserve that. The truth is, I've been losing sight of what matters. Building Monarch became about proving something, to my father's memory, to the world, to myself, that I was more than that kid from a failed steel town. He gestured toward the window, toward Millfield beyond. But coming back here with you, it's reminded me who I really am. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of shared wounds and parallel journeys that had brought them full circle. Jack, she began, but was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching. Looking out the window, Jackson tensed. That's Winters. A sleek black SUV had pulled up beside their rental car. A man in an expensive suit emerged, his expression darkening when he spotted their vehicle. He shouldn't be here, Jackson muttered. Unless he knows you're investigating him, Abby finished. Stay inside, Jackson instructed, moving toward the door. But Abby was already following him. Not a chance. This involves my family, too. Outside, Kyle Winters showed no surprise at finding them there. Jackson, he greeted coldly, when I heard you'd flown to Pittsburgh, I assumed you might make a detour to our little investment. Former investment, Jackson corrected. As of this morning, all Millfield development projects are suspended pending review. Winters smiled thinly. The board might have something to say about that. The board has already been briefed on your fraudulent acquisition tactics, Jackson replied. And they're particularly interested in the discrepancies between your official mineral surveys and the actual findings. For the first time, Winters' composure faltered. His gaze shifted to Abby. Ms. Martinez, I wasn't aware you were acquainted with our CEO. We go way back, she replied evenly. Long before you tricked my dying father into signing away his legacy. Winters' expression hardened. I secured valuable assets for the company at favorable terms. Everything I did was for Monarch's benefit. Was embezzling company funds also for Monarch's benefit? Jackson asked calmly. Winters went still. I don't know what you're talking about. The shell company you established in the Cayman Islands to handle the mineral assessment, Ridgeline Explorations. It received nearly $2 million from Monarch for surveys, but subcontracted the actual work for a fraction of that amount. The difference disappeared into offshore accounts. The color drained from Winters' face. You can't prove anything. We already have. Jackson pulled out his phone. Michael has been cooperating with federal authorities since 6 this morning. They're executing a search warrant at your office right now." As if on cue, Winters's phone began ringing. He stared at it but made no move to answer. "It's over, Kyle," Jackson said quietly. "The best thing you can do now is cooperate." For a moment it seemed Winters might lunge at them or flee. Instead, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "You have no idea what you're throwing away, Reed. The minerals under this land could make Monarch the most powerful company in America." "Maybe," Jackson agreed, "but not like this." After Winters departed, promising through gritted teeth to meet with Monarch's legal team, Abby and Jackson stood in silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. "What happens now?" she asked finally. Jackson turned to her, the fading sunlight illuminating his face in a way that momentarily transported her back to their childhood. Summer evenings when they would watch the sunset from their treehouse, dreaming of futures they couldn't possibly imagine. "Now," he said, taking her hand, "we rebuild what was broken. Not just the legal agreements, but Millfield itself. The mineral deposits here could revitalize this entire community if managed responsibly." "And us?" Abby asked softly. "What about what was broken between us?" Jackson's fingers tightened around hers. 16 years ago, I lost my best friend without saying goodbye. Yesterday, I found her again pouring coffee in a Manhattan cafe. If that's not a second chance, I don't know what is." He drew her closer. "I've built skyscrapers and changed skylines, Abby, but none of it has felt as real or important as standing here with you." As the sun dipped below the trees, casting long shadows across the land her family had tended for generations, Abby made a decision. She rose on tiptoes and pressed her lips gently to his, a bridge across the years of separation. 6 months later, Abby stood on the porch of the restored farmhouse, watching as Jackson directed the installation of solar panels on the newly constructed community center across the creek. The Martinez Foundation headquarters now occupied the ground floor with classrooms for technical training above, preparing local residents for jobs in the carefully planned extraction facility that would soon break ground. The Henderson Media acquisition had never materialized, with Jackson redirecting Monarch's focus toward sustainable resource development and community revitalization. Kyle Winters awaited trial on multiple fraud charges, while the families he had deceived had received proper compensation and restored property rights. As for Abby and Jackson, they were taking things one day at a time. She had transferred her business courses to a Pennsylvania university, dividing her time between finishing her degree and helping establish the foundation. Jackson had shocked his board by relocating Monarch's sustainability division to Pittsburgh, allowing him to spend half his time in Millfield. "Penny for your thoughts?" Jackson asked, joining her on the porch after the workers departed. "I was thinking about fate," she replied, leaning against him as they watched the sunset. "How something as simple as a cup of coffee changed everything." "Not fate," he corrected gently. "Choice. I chose to walk into that cafe. You chose to serve my table. I chose to leave my card. You chose to meet me. We keep choosing each other every day since." Abby smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them full circle, from childhood friends to strangers to something new and precious that continued to evolve. The path ahead wasn't perfectly clear, but for the first time in years, it was full of possibility rather than resignation. "So what's our next choice?" she asked, turning to face him. Jackson smiled, that crooked grin that had first captured her heart by the creek so many years ago. "I was thinking dinner. Then maybe a walk down to the treehouse I've been rebuilding." "Perfect," she agreed, taking his hand. "After all,